Hello everyone, welcome to today's session where we're going to look at the essay on Superstitions by A.G. Gardiner. Before we dive into the text, let's have a brief discussion about the essayist A.G. Gardiner. He was a well-known journalist and an essayist of an outstanding merit. He was the editor of Daily News London and the president of the Institute of Journalists. From 1915, he started writing for the Star under the pseudonym Alpha of the Plough, from which he is better known to the students of literature. His major works include Pillars of Society, The Warlords, Pebbles on the Shore, Leaves in the Wind, and many Prose. And Gardiner is perhaps one of the most lovable and pleasant writers. His works are elegant, graceful, and humorous. What makes Gardiner special or unique that he specializes in writing about the basic truths of life in a very easy and entertaining manner. His style is natural and lucid and devoid of any ornamentation. So let's begin the essay now. This essay is an attack on the prevalence of the superstitious beliefs even in the modern age, where Gardiner begins with the mention of this number 13 and the fears and anxieties associated with this particular number 13. So I'm reading the text now. It was inevitable that the fact that a murder has taken place at a house with the number 13 in a street, the letters of whose name number 13 would not pass unnoticed. So what Gardiner is saying here, it's very clear that he begins by reporting a murder which had taken place at a house with the number 13. And what he adds further in this report, that if we took the last 100 murders that have been committed, I suppose we should find that as many have taken place at number 6 or number 7 or any other number you choose as at number 13, that the law of averages is an inexorable here as elsewhere. So he's telling that if we take an average record of all the murders committed, then it could have taken place at any other houses which are numbered 6 or 7. So similar is with the number 13. It's not any special with this number 13, but when it is the turn of number 13, or when anything happens related to number 13 or the place which is associated with number 13, it becomes inevitable for people to give it a special kind of notice, or in other words, it becomes difficult for people to ignore it. But this consideration does not prevent the world, this consideration of taking an average record, then it could happen with number 6, 7 or other numbers too. But this consideration does not prevent the world remarking on the fact that when number 13 has its turn. Note that the world believes there is anything in the superstition. It is quite sure it is a mere childish folly. So what Gardiner is saying here, that in this advancing age we have come ahead of superstitious beliefs, and we consider these superstitious belief nothing more than a mere childish folly. Of course, few of us would refuse to take a house because its number was 13, or decline an invitation to dinner because there were to be 13 at table. But then too, it is so much prevalent and it is affecting our psyche to such an extent that though we have come at the level, or we have reached at the level where we have done so many advancements in terms of science and technology, few of us would refuse. Then too, it is prevalent that a few of us still refuse to buy a house which is number 13 just due to this reason, or decline an invitation to dinner because there were to be, and people still tend to decline such an invitation where, or to join such a party where total number of guests are 13. But most of us would be just a shade happier if that desirable residence were number 11, and not any the less pleased with the dinner if one of the guests contracted a chill that kept him away. So though being a modern man, we don't accept this, that we are superstitious or we consider this number 13 as an inauspicious number, but it is the fact that generally we become happier when this number is avoided, because still we are inclined, or people are inclined to be happy when or people are inclined to live in a residence which is numbered 11 rather than number 13, and not any the less pleased. And they have this secret wish in their heart that if there are total number of guests are 13, then one of the members should catch a cold, so that he should be absent, and this will reduce the number of guests from 13. So they will be less pleased with the dinner if one of the, they will not less pleased, they will be very happy that if the dinner at such a dinner party, at such a party where number of guests are 13, so they wish that that one of the members should catch a cold and he should remain, he should be absent in the party, so that number 13 should not be materialized, or there should be no total number of guests are not 13. We would not confess this little weakness to each other. We might even refuse to admit it to ourselves, but it is there, that we may as I told you, that being a modern man, people don't admit it, people even don't confess it to themselves in private, but they are in the influence of this belief. So in order to prove his point, or to elaborate it more, Gardiner goes on to say that it exists is evident from many irrefutable signs that this superstitious belief still exists, and in favor of this belief he suggests, or he give many undeniable signs which proves that people are still superstitious even in the modern age. There are numerous streets in London, and I dare say in other towns too, in which there is no house number 13, and I am told that it is very rare that a bed in a hospital bears that number. Said that he is saying that you can see that there are several streets in London, like other big towns of the world. There is, in those streets there is no house, it is very difficult to find a house which is number 13. There is no house which is number 13, and it is very rare to see a bed number 13 in the hospitals. The superstition, threadbare though it has worn, is still sufficiently real to enter into the calculations of a discreet landlord in regard to the letting qualities of this house, and into the calculations of a hospital as to the curative properties of a bed. So what Gardiner is throwing light upon, that the superstition, that though this superstition which has no logic, the belief which has no logic, has become an outdated subject matter, but it becomes very significant, it becomes very evident when it is to judge the merits of a landlord's house whose house number is 13. While judging the merits of a landlord's house, it becomes very evident, this belief that whose house number is 13, and into the calculations of a hospital. And it also becomes very much significant when it is to realize the curative properties of a bed, of a hospital bed with the same number. In the latter case, general agreement would support the concession to the superstition, idle though that superstition is. Now, in the case of hospitals, latter case, in the case of hospitals, Gardiner seems to give concession to this superstitious belief, which is to avoid bed number 13 in the hospitals, and he, in the favor of this concession, his concession to this superstitious belief, what arguments he gives is that physical recovery is a matter of the mind as well as of the body. So he is saying that physical recovery depends as much on the mental attitude and on the physical health. Good health is a combination of mind and body, and if mind is full of fears, it doesn't matter that the fears are imaginary like superstition. If fears are superstition, then too it has a certain effect on the recovery, on the process of recovery. So the mind which is tense and which is fearful, it it affects the process of recovery. And the slightest shadow on the mind may, in a condition of low vitality, retard and even defeat recovery. So the mind which is fearful, doubtful and pessimistic, it can affect and it can stop the process of recovery. So here what Gardner seems to suggest is that the doubts arise, the doubts arise in the minds of the patients, can stop the process of their recovery. It affects their doubts can affect their recovery process. So hospitals can be scrapped, or the bed number 13 can be can be scrapped from the hospitals, because it is a matter of life and death. And in the hospitals, our main aim is to bring back good health to the sick man. We are not fighting a battle against superstitions in the hospitals. So that's why he is giving his concession to the superstitious belief in case of hospitals, because it is a matter of life and death, and it is a very much related to the mental attitude, as he is trying to prove his point with the examples of physical recovery, mental attitude, and the effects of doubts, fears arise in the minds of the patients. What he says further: Florence Nightingale's almost passionate advocacy of flowers in the sick bedroom was based on the necessity of the creation of a certain state of mind in the patient. So here he refers to the lamp with the lady Florence Nightingale, who passionately advocated that beautiful flowers should be kept in the room of the patients, which boosts the positivity and which becomes the reason of the fast recovery in the patient's health. So this is the effect of. There are few more curious revelations in that moving record by M. Damel of medical experiences during the war than the case of the man who died of a pimple on his nose. So to substantiate his point, here Gardiner is mentioning this French author M. Damel, who served as a doctor in the World War First, and he was a man who recorded in his writings about a man who died of a pimple on his nose. So what was his case? That he had been hideously mutilated in battle and was brought into hospital a sheer wreck. So what he recorded in his writings, that there was a man who was severely injured and very badly mutilated in battlefield, and when he was brought into hospital, he was in his absolute ruins, but he was slowly patched up and seemed to have been saved when a pimple appeared on his nose. But this man who was badly mutilated or badly disfigured, he overcame his wounds after getting treatment in the hospital, but until the point a pimple appeared on his nose and he died. It seemed that he died of a pimple appeared on his nose. But what was the case actually? It was nothing in itself, but it was enough to produce a mental state that checked the flickering return of life. It assumed a fantastic importance in the mind of the patient who, having survived the heavy blows of fate, died of something less than a pinprick. So it was very surprising that how can a man who overcame such hardships or heavy blows of life, who faced many hardships of life, and he just succumbed to a pimple, who was very less than a pinprick, who was succumbed to a pinprick. It was very surprising. So actually it was the case that the man who was badly injured and who overcame or who recovered later after getting the treatment in the hospital, and later he died too. So the case was that later he discovered, when it was a moment when he discovered or he came to know that he was kept on a bed number 13. This discovery of having or lying on the bed number 13 was sufficient enough in shaking his confidence and willpower to survive, which stopped his process of recovery. Check the flickering return of life. It stopped his process of recovery, and it assumed and it was such an and his belief associated with the number 13, his fears, and he this apprehensive or he was his apprehensions related to number 13 were so much significant that it affected his mind, so much so that he died of something less than a pinprick. It is not difficult to understand that so fragile a hold of life might yield to the sudden discovery that you were lying in number 13 bed. As I have told you earlier, that these lines are suggesting the same thing, that when he discovered that he was lying on number 13 bed, he just lost all the hopes of his possible recovery. Though he was almost recovered from the bad or from the high or very fatal wounds on his body, but later he died. So in nutshell, we can say that he died neither of war, injuries, nor of pimple, but he died of superstition. So at this point, we are I'm stopping this lecture at this point, and we'll continue this essay in the lectures to come. Thank you for your attention.